They were told Americans would torture them, starve them, strip them naked in the snow, and laugh while they froze. But when 127 German women stumbled off cattle cars at Camp Stark, New Hampshire, in February 1945, the enemy tried to save them with wool blankets and hot coffee. The women screamed, "Let us die in the cold." They threw the blankets back. They knocked the coffee to the frozen ground. They would rather freeze than accept American mercy. Then one soldier did something that shattered everything they believed. His response lasted less than 60 seconds, but it broke their resistance completely. What happened next would haunt these women for the rest of their lives, not because of cruelty, but because of what kindness revealed about the lies they had swallowed. The train screeched to a halt in the middle of nowhere, its brakes screaming against frozen rails. Outside, the world was white and brutal. Snow fell in thick sheets driven sideways by wind that cut like broken glass. The temperature sat at 14 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. The wooden cattle cars that had carried the women from the Boston port offered no protection. Ice had formed on the inside walls during the two-day journey north. The wind found every gap in the wooden slats. Every crack became a knife of cold air. Inside car number 7, Kate Miller pressed her face against a gap in the wood. She was 23 but looked older. Dark circles hung under her eyes like bruises. Her fingers were blue at the tips. Her breath came out in white clouds that froze on her scarf within seconds. Behind her, 126 other women huddled in the darkness. Their bodies packed so tightly that some could not sit. Some had not sat for 12 hours. They wore the gray-green uniforms of the Helferinnen Hitler's Women's Auxiliary Corps. Secretaries, radio operators, nurses, factory workers, now prisoners. "What do you see?" whispered Anna Hoffman, a girl from Berlin who had operated anti-aircraft searchlights until the Reich collapsed. Her voice trembled. Whether from cold or fear, Kate could not tell. Nothing, Kate said. Snow, trees, more snow. She paused. Guard towers. The word sent a ripple through the car. Guard towers. That meant the camp. That meant whatever came next would begin soon. For 2 weeks since their surrender in the ruins of Hamburg, the women had heard stories. The Americans were not men, but monsters. They would separate the women, strip them, photograph them naked for propaganda. They would force them into brothels for the soldiers. They would torture them for information about the Reich. An SS officer bleeding from a head wound during the chaos of surrender had grabbed Kate's arm. His fingers dug into her flesh hard enough to bruise. His breath smelled like blood and schnapps. "They will do to you what the Russians did in the East," he whispered. His eyes were wild, desperate, but worse. "The Americans smile while they destroy you." Kate had believed him. The car door slid open with a metal shriek that cut through the wind. Light and cold rushed in together, blinding after hours of darkness. Women screamed. Some tried to push backward, but there was nowhere to go. The car was packed too tight. American voices shouted in English, harsh and foreign. "Out. Everyone out. Move." Kate was shoved forward. Her boots hit the ground, and immediately she felt the cold bite through the worn leather. The soles had holes. She had been walking in wet boots for 3 weeks. Her feet were numb, had been numb for days. Around her, women stumbled from the train, blinking against the snow, their arms wrapped around themselves. Some carried small bags. Others had nothing. They formed a ragged line on the platform, shivering violently. Their teeth chattering so hard it sounded like rattling bones. Kate looked up. The camp stretched before them like something from a nightmare made orderly. Barbed wire fences, guard towers with searchlights, rows of wooden barracks painted dark green. American soldiers stood in formation, their rifles slung casually over their shoulders, their breath fogging in the frozen air. They wore thick winter coats, heavy gloves, wool caps pulled low over their ears. The women wore threadbare uniforms designed for German summers, not New Hampshire winters. Then Kate noticed something that made her stomach twist. The soldiers were not shouting. They were not laughing. They were not leering. They looked uncomfortable. One young soldier, barely older than 20, stared at the women with an expression Kate could not read. Was it pity? Disgust? She did not know. And not knowing terrified her more than hate would have. "Form a line," shouted an American officer. His voice was sharp, but not cruel. Single file. We'll process you one at a time. Process. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Kate remembered the SS officer's warning. This is where it begins, she thought. The humiliation, the degradation. She clenched her jaw and prepared herself for the worst. But then something happened that no one expected. 3 American soldiers approached, carrying large gray bundles, blankets, thick military-issue wool blankets. They moved down the line, handing one to each woman. Here one soldier said to Kate, holding out a folded blanket, "You're freezing." Kate stared at the blanket. Her mind could not process what she was seeing. This was a trick. It had to be. They would give the blankets and then take them away. Or the blankets were poisoned. Or this was a test to see who was weak enough to accept American charity. "No," Kate said. Her voice came out as a croak. The soldier blinked. "What?" "No," Kate repeated, louder this time. "We do not want your blankets." Behind her, Anna's voice rose, shrill with fear and defiance. "Let us die in the cold. We would rather freeze than accept anything from you." The cry spread down the line. Other women began shouting, their voices cracking with cold and terror. "Let us die. We want nothing from you. Do what you will, but we will not take your poison charity." One woman grabbed a blanket that had been placed on her shoulders and threw it to the ground. Then another. Then another. Gray wool landed in the snow. Rejected. Spurned. The American soldiers stood frozen, their faces showing shock, confusion, and something else. Hurt. But it was what happened next that would change everything. Private Thomas O'Brien from Boston was 21 years old. He had landed on Omaha Beach 8 months earlier and fought his way through France and Germany. He had seen men die. He had killed men. He had walked through concentration camps and seen horrors that would wake him screaming for the rest of his life. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. Standing in the snow, watching women freeze rather than accept help. He had been raised Catholic in South Boston, the son of Irish immigrants who had fled poverty and oppression. His mother had taught him that you help people when they need it. No questions asked. You feed the hungry, you clothe the naked, you shelter the homeless. It did not matter if they were friend or enemy. It only mattered that they were human. And watching these German women scared and freezing and so thoroughly convinced they were about to be tortured that they would rather die than accept a blanket, O'Brien felt something break inside him. The war had already taken so much. It had taken his friends, his innocence, his belief that the world made sense. He would not let it take these women too. The other soldiers looked to their sergeant, waiting for orders. But O'Brien did not wait. He unbuttoned his heavy winter coat, slowly, deliberately. The women watched him, their eyes wide with terror. This was it, they thought. This was where the violence began. O'Brien pulled off his coat. Underneath, he wore only his uniform shirt and undershirt. The cold hit him immediately, biting through the thin fabric. His body had been warm inside the coat. Now the wind found him, wrapped around him, began stealing his heat. Then he walked to the nearest woman, an older German in her 40s whose lips had turned blue, and he draped his coat over her shoulders. The woman screamed, threw the coat off like it was on fire. It landed in the snow between them. O'Brien picked it up, brushed off the snow, and tried again. Again she threw it down. This time she spat at his feet. "Please," O'Brien said quietly. "You'll die out here, then we die," the woman shrieked in broken English. "Better to die than accept your lies." O'Brien stood there in the falling snow, his coat in his hands, his body already beginning to shake from the cold. The wind cut through his uniform shirt like it was paper. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones, into his chest. His fingers were already going numb. Then he did something no one expected. He sat down in the snow, right there, cross-legged. He placed his coat on the ground in front of him and looked up at the women. "Then I'll sit here too," he said. "If you're going to freeze, I'll freeze with you." The platform went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The women stared at this American soldier sitting in the snow, already turning red from the cold, refusing to put his coat back on. His sergeant started forward. Sergeant Miller, a big man from Texas who had seen action in North Africa and Italy. Miller's face was twisted with concern and confusion. "O'Brien, what the hell are you doing? Get up, put your coat on." But O'Brien raised a hand. "No, sir," he said. "If they won't take the blankets, I won't take my coat. Fair is fair." Kate watched this unfold with a feeling like drowning. This was not in the script. The Americans were supposed to laugh. They were supposed to force the blankets on the women, proving their dominance. They were supposed to drag the women inside by their hair. They were not supposed to sit in the snow and offer to freeze. Minutes passed. The snow fell, thick and relentless. It accumulated on O'Brien's shoulders, in his hair, on his outstretched hands. His lips began to turn purple. His hands shook violently, but he did not move. He sat there looking at nothing, his eyes distant. Kate realized with a shock that he was not performing. He was not trying to shame them. He genuinely intended to sit there until they accepted the blankets, or he froze to death. "You are insane," Anna whispered beside her. O'Brien looked up at her and smiled. It was a sad smile, tired and old beyond his years. Maybe he said, "But you're not the enemy anymore. The war is over, and I'm not going to let you freeze just because you're scared." The word hit like a slap. Scared, not defiant, not brave. Scared. And it was true. Kate felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she had built to keep the terror at bay. She looked around at the other women. They were all shaking, all blue-lipped, all terrified. And this American soldier saw through it all. Another minute passed. O'Brien's sergeant was arguing with an officer now, gesturing at O'Brien, clearly worried us. The temperature was 14 degrees. Sitting in the snow without a coat, a man could get hypothermia in minutes. Frostbite even faster. But O'Brien did not move. Snow was accumulating on his shoulders, melting slightly from his body heat and then freezing into ice. His breathing had become shallow, visible in short white puffs. His whole body trembled. Not just his hands now, everything. Finally, Kate could not stand it anymore. She stepped forward, picked up one of the rejected blankets from the snow, and wrapped it around her shoulders. The wool was thick and heavy and blessedly warm. It smelled like American laundry soap, clean and fresh. Nothing like the rough blankets they had used in Germany. Blankets that smelled like mothballs and mildew and too many unwashed bodies. There she said, her voice breaking, "I took the blanket. Now put on your coat before you die, you stupid American." O'Brien looked at the other women. One by one, slowly they began picking up the blankets. Some cried as they did it, tears freezing on their cheeks. Others looked away, ashamed, as if accepting warmth was betraying something sacred. But they took the blankets, every single one. Only then did O'Brien stand. His legs barely supported him. He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. His lips were purple, his fingers white. Another soldier rushed forward with his coat and helped him put it on. O'Brien's hands shook too much to work the buttons. The other soldier had to button it for him. O'Brien nodded his thanks, then looked back at the women. "Welcome to Camp Stark," he said quietly. "You're safe now." The words should have sounded absurd, but they did not, because Kate realized standing there wrapped in an American blanket that she believed him. Before we continue, if you appreciate true stories from World War II that challenge what you thought you knew, stories that reveal the power of mercy over hatred, please hit that like button and subscribe. These accounts deserve to be remembered. Now let me take you back to how these women arrived at this moment of refusal. 48 hours earlier, Hamburg, Germany, March 1945. The city was a graveyard of steel and stone. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble by Allied bombing raids. The firestorms had turned whole districts into ash. Buildings that had stood for centuries were now hollow shells, their windows empty and black like the eye sockets of skulls. Kate Muller stood in what had once been her street. She could not recognize it. The bakery where her mother had bought bread every morning was gone. The school where she had learned to read was a pile of bricks. The park where she had played as a child was now a mass grave, hundreds of wooden crosses marking hurried burials. She wore her Helferinnen uniform, gray-green wool, a skirt that fell below her knees, sturdy shoes that were falling apart. She had been a seamstress before the war, good with her hands, quick with a needle. When the right calling for volunteers to support the war effort, she had answered. It had seemed patriotic at the time. She had worked in a Luftwaffe office, typing letters, organizing flight schedules, filing reports. She told herself she was just doing paperwork, that she was not really part of the war machine. But she knew better. Those flight schedules had sent bombers over England, over cities full of people, people who were probably just like her, just trying to survive, just doing their jobs. Her hands were not clean. SS Captain Steiner found her standing in the ruins. He was bleeding from a head wound. The right side of his face was covered in blood. His uniform was torn and filthy. The Reich was collapsing around them. The Americans were coming from the west, the Russians from the east. It was over. Everyone knew it was over. But Steiner's eyes still burned with fanatical belief. He grabbed Kate's arm. His fingers dug into her flesh, hard enough to bruise. "Listen to me," he said. His breath smelled like blood and schnapps. "You are going to be captured. There is no avoiding it. But you must remember what they are." Who are?" Kate asked, though she already knew. "The Americans," Steiner said. He pulled her closer. "They are not men. They are devils who smile. They will tell you they follow rules. The Geneva Convention. They will promise you safety, food, shelter. But it is all lies." His grip tightened. "They will do to you what the Russians did to our women in the East, but worse, because the Americans are clever. They will break you slowly. They will strip you naked and photograph you. They will put you in brothels for their soldiers. They will make you beg, and they will smile the whole time." Kate tried to pull away, but Steiner held firm. "Remember this," he said. "When they offer you kindness, it is poison. When they offer you mercy, it is a trap. Die with your dignity intact rather than live as their whore." Then he let her go, stumbled away into the ruins. Kate never saw him again, but his words stayed with her. 2 days later, Kate stood in a train yard with 126 other women. They were being loaded into cattle cars, wooden cars that smelled like livestock and old straw. Cars designed to transport animals, not people. An American officer supervised the loading. He was polite, almost apologetic. He assured them they would be treated according to the Geneva Convention, that they would be given food and shelter and medical care. Kate did not believe him. She remembered Steiner's words. "This is poison. This is a trap." In the cattle car pressed between Anna and an older woman named Ingrid, Kate whispered her fears. The other women nodded. They had heard the same stories. They believed the same warning bungs. But it was another voice that sealed their resolve. Corporal Franz Richter was a career Wehrmacht officer, 45 years old, a true believer in Reich ideology. He had been captured at the Battle of the Bulge. Now he was being transported in the male prisoner section of the same train. But before the doors closed, he managed to get close enough to the women's car to be heard. "Listen carefully," he called in German. "The Americans will try to break you with false kindness. It is psychological warfare. They will offer you food, warm beds, hot showers. They will treat you like guests instead of prisoners." His voice was hard, commanding. "It is all a trick. They want you to forget who you are. They want you to become grateful, compliant, weak. They want you to betray the fatherland." Some of the women began to cry. "Those who accept their charity are collaborators." Richter continued. "Those who eat their food are traitors. When the Reich rebuilds, and it will rebuild, we will remember. We will know who stayed loyal and who did not." Then the doors slammed shut. The train lurched forward. And for 2 days they traveled in darkness, packed so tight some could not sit. The temperature dropping with each mile north. Ice forming on the inside walls. The smell of unwashed bodies and fear filling the car. They whispered in the darkness, sharing rumors, reinforcing fears. Anna told Kate about her little brother, Hans, 8 years old, still in Berlin. The city was being bombed every night. Food was scarce, coal for heating even more scarce. Anna worried constantly, every moment. What if he was cold? What if he was hungry? What if he was scared? What if he was dead and she would never know? Ingrid, the oldest at 32, tried to keep spirits up. She was a nurse, had treated wounded German soldiers on the Eastern Front, had seen terrible things, but she still believed, still had faith in the Reich. "The rumors about camps are Allied propaganda," she insisted. "Lies to justify what they did to our cities. The Americans want us to believe we were the monsters, but we know better. Kate wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that everything would be all right. But Steiner's words echoed in her head. They will smile while they destroy you. When the train finally stopped and the doors opened, Kate was certain she was stepping into hell. They were led through gates crowned with barbed wire and into a long wooden building that smelled of pine and disinfectant. Inside, it was warm. Radiators clanked and hissed along the walls. The sudden heat after hours of freezing cold made Kate dizzy, made the world spin. Several women stumbled, their legs giving out. American soldiers caught them before they fell. Gently, a female officer appeared. She was in her 30s, wearing a crisp uniform, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She spoke German with a heavy American accent, but was understandable. "My name is Lieutenant Sarah Hartman," she said. "I know you are frightened. I know you have been told terrible things about what will happen here. But I want you to understand something." She paused, looking at each woman in turn. "You are prisoners of war. Yes, but you will be treated according to the Geneva Convention. That means you will be given shelter, food, medical care, and work appropriate to your abilities. You will not be harmed. You will not be forced to do anything degrading. You have my word." The women said nothing. They stood in a tight cluster, the blankets wrapped around them like armor. "First, we need to process you," Lieutenant Hartman continued. "That means recording your names, your ranks, your units. Then you will go through medical screening and delousing. I know that sounds frightening, but it is standard procedure. After that, you will be assigned to barracks, given clean clothes, and fed a hot meal, delousing." The word sent a current of fear through the group. That meant showers. That meant undressing. That meant exactly what the SS officer had warned about. Kate's hands tightened on her blanket. Beside her, Anna had gone pale. "This is where it happens," Anna whispered. "This is where they photograph us, where they—" She could not finish the sentence, but there were no cameras in the medical room. No leering soldiers. The women were led in groups of 10 into a tiled room where female American medics waited. The medics were professional, efficient, and bored. They checked for lice, for skin diseases, for injuries that needed treatment. They did not mock. They did not stare. They worked quickly and sent the women through to the showers. The shower room was large and white, dozens of nozzles along the walls. Kate stood there still wearing her filthy uniform and stared at the shower heads with paralyzed certainty that this was a trick, that gas would come out instead of water, that this was how it would end. "You can keep your undergarments on if you prefer," one medic said in German, "but you will need to wash. You have been traveling for weeks. Trust me, you will feel better." Slowly, hesitantly, the women began to undress. Kate removed her jacket, her skirt, her torn stockings. She kept her undergarments on and stepped under a shower head. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. She turned it. Water came out. Hot water. Real clean hot water. Not warm, but ice. Water that steamed and ran clear and felt like a miracle against her skin. Kate stood under the stream and felt months of grime and fear and exhaustion wash away. Around her, other women were crying. Some were laughing. Some were silent. Their faces tilted up to the water. Their eyes closed. It was the first hot shower any of them had experienced in over a year. Then came the soap. Real soap. Not the gray, gritty bars they had used in Germany that smelled like lye and left your skin raw. This was white, smooth, and it smelled like lavender. Lavender. Kate held the bar in her hands and stared at it like it was a jewel. The scent filled the steam. Sweet and floral and impossibly clean. The soap lathered into thick, creamy foam between her fingers. Soft as clouds, slippery and rich. "They give us soap," Anna said, her voice thick with tears. "Real soap. Why do they give us soap?" Kate had no answer. She washed her hair, her face, her arms. She scrubbed until her skin turned pink, until she felt new. When she finally shut off the water and stepped out, a medic handed her a towel, a clean, white, soft towel that smelled like sunshine. "There are clean clothes in the next room," the medic said. "Take whatever fits. We have undergarments, socks, work clothes, sweaters. Everything is laundered." Kate dressed in American work clothes, canvas pants, a cotton shirt, a wool sweater, thick socks, and boots that actually fit. She looked at herself in a mirror on the wall and did not recognize the woman staring back. Clean, warm, no longer wearing the uniform of a defeated army. Kate Anna stood beside her, also dressed in American clothes, her wet hair combed back from her face. What is happening to us? I do not know, Kate said quietly, but it is not what we were told. Kate followed the line of women shuffling toward double doors marked medical. Through the gap, she glimpsed white tile walls, shower heads, and something that froze her blood. What looked like camera equipment on tripods. Captain Steiner had been right. This was where the degradation would begin. But what Kate did not know, what none of them knew, was that those cameras were not pointed at the showers at all. What they were actually for would shatter every assumption she had carried across the Atlantic. And the real shock would not come from what the Americans took from her in that room, but from what they gave her, something so simple, so ordinary, that it would become the symbol of everything she had been lied to about. A single bar of soap. That smelled like lavender. They were led to a dining hall, a long wooden building with tables and benches arranged in neat rows. The smell hit them first. Food. Real food. Not the watery cabbage soup or sawdust bread they had survived on for the last year of the war. This smelled like meat, like vegetables, like bread fresh from an oven. The women filed into the hall and stood frozen, staring. American soldiers were eating at some tables. They looked up as the women entered. A few nodded. Most went back to their meals. No one jeered. No one shouted. It was almost disappointingly normal. "Line up here," Lieutenant Hartman called. "Take a tray and the kitchen staff will serve you." Kate picked up a metal tray. It was heavy. Real metal. Not tin. She moved down the line and American cooks in white aprons placed food on her tray. Mashed potatoes, green beans, a thick slice of meatloaf, a roll with butter, a cup of coffee, an apple. Kate stared at the tray. There was more food here than she had eaten in a week back in Hamburg during the final months of the war. The meatloaf was steaming. The butter was real butter, yellow and soft. The apple was red and perfect, without bruises or wormholes. She sat down at a table with Anna and 3 other women. None of them spoke. They stared at their trays like they were looking at something impossible. "Is it poisoned?" whispered one woman, a girl named Elizabeth who had been a typist in Munich. "If they wanted to poison us, they would not waste real food doing it," Anna said. But even she did not touch her tray. Kate picked up the roll. It was warm in her hand. The heat seeped into her cold fingers. She tore off a piece and put it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue. Butter, salt, wheat, yeast. It was the most delicious thing she had ever eaten. She chewed slowly, tears running down her face. Around her, other women began to eat. Some cried openly, others ate in silence, their faces blank with shock. One woman took a bite of meatloaf and immediately vomited into her napkin. Her stomach, shrunken from months of starvation, could not handle real food. A medic appeared instantly, helped her to a chair, gave her crackers and water instead. Kate forced herself to eat slowly. The mashed potatoes were creamy and rich. The green beans had been cooked with something that tasted smoky and salty. Bacon, she would learn later. She had never tasted bacon before. It was an American flavor, foreign and wonderful. The meatloaf was salty and savory and fell apart under her fork. She drank the coffee. It was hot and bitter and perfect. "My brother is starving in Cologne," Anna said suddenly. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "My mother is living in a cellar eating rats, and I am here eating meatloaf." The words hung in the air. Every woman at the table knew it was true. They were prisoners eating better than their families, better than their countrymen, better than the victors back home in the ruins of Germany. "How can this be right?" Elizabeth whispered. "How can the enemy feed us when our own people are starving?" Kate had no answer. She picked up the apple and bit into it. The juice ran down her chin. It tasted like autumn, like orchards, like a world that had not been destroyed by war. And it tasted, though she would not admit it yet, like mercy. But what the women did not know was that in the male compound, Corporal Franz Richter was watching through binoculars, watching them sit before American food. And his first message was already being prepared. A message that would arrive hidden in Anna's clean laundry the next morning. A message that said, We know who eats, we know who collaborates, and we remember. In the male prisoner compound 300 yards from the women's barracks, Richter stood at the window of his quarters, the binoculars pressed to his eyes. He watched the women file into the dining hall, watched them emerge 30 minutes later, their faces different, less hollow, less afraid. He lowered the binoculars, his jaw tight. They are eating, he said to the 6 men gathered in his room. All hardcore Nazi loyalists, all true believers. They are wearing American clothes. They are accepting the enemy's charity. One of the men, a young SS officer named Weber, spat on the floor. Traitors, all of them. No, Richter said. Not traitors, not yet. They are confused, frightened. The Americans are clever. They use kindness as a weapon. They make the women doubt, make them forget who they are. He turned to face the men. Our duty is clear. We must remind them. We must keep them loyal. When the Reich rebuilds, and it will rebuild, we need soldiers, not collaborators. However asked, we are in separate compounds. We cannot speak to them directly. There are ways, Richter said. There are guards who sympathize, who pass messages, and there are work details where men and women cross paths. We will find ways. He picked up a pencil and paper. We start with simple reminders. Let them know they are being watched, that we see who accepts, who collaborates, who forgets their oath. What if they ignore us, another man asked. Then we escalate, Richter said, his voice cold. We remind them that this war is not over. The war of ideology continues, and those who betray us will face consequences. If not now, then later, when we return home. He began writing. The first message would go to the women's barracks tomorrow, hidden in laundry, passed through sympathetic hands. Short, simple, terrifying. We see who eats American food. We see who wears American clothes. We see who forgets their oath. When the Reich rebuilds, collaborators will be held accountable. He signed it with his initials, FR. The women would know who it was from, and they would know he was serious. After the meal, they were led to their barracks, Barrack 14, a long wooden building with a potbelly stove in the center and rows of bunk beds along the walls. Each bed had a mattress, 2 blankets, a pillow, and a footlocker. Kate climbed onto a lower bunk and sat down. The mattress was thin but real, stuffed with straw. The blankets were wool, heavy and warm. The pillow smelled faintly of laundry soap. She ran her hand across the rough wool and felt something inside her break. This was a bed, a real bed, not a concrete floor, not a pile of straw in a bombed-out building, a bed with blankets and a pillow. They even gave us pillows, Anna said from the bunk above. Her voice was thick with unshed tears. I have not had a pillow since 1943. The stove in the center of the barracks crackled with fire. One of the American soldiers had shown them how to feed it with wood from a pile outside. The heat spread through the room, pushing back the New Hampshire cold. Women gathered around the stove, holding their hands out to the warmth, their faces glowing orange in the firelight. That night, lying in her bunk, wrapped in American blankets, Kate could not sleep. Her body was exhausted, but her mind raced. Everything she had been told was wrong. The Americans were not monsters. They had not beaten her. They had not degraded her. They had given her blankets, soap, food, and a bed. Why? Around her, women whispered in the darkness. Some were crying softly. Others prayed. A few slept, their breathing deep and even, their bodies finally relaxing after weeks of terror. Kate Anna's voice came from above. Yes, what if everything we were told about the Americans was a lie? The question hung in the air like smoke. Kate did not answer. Because if that was true, then what else had been a lie? The Reich's promises of victory, the stories about the Allies being subhuman, the entire war itself. The thought was too big, too dangerous. Kate pulled the blanket up to her chin and closed her eyes. The days developed a rhythm. Wake at 6 to the sound of a bell. Wash at the communal sinks. Breakfast in the dining hall. Oatmeal with brown sugar. Toast with jam. Coffee. Sometimes eggs. Then work assignments. The work was not hard. The Geneva Convention prohibited using prisoners for military purposes. So the women were assigned to tasks like laundry, kitchen duty, sewing, and maintenance. Kate was sent to the sewing room where she repaired uniforms and bedding. The work was familiar. She had been a seamstress before the war. The sewing room was warm and well lit. They had real thread, real needles, real fabric. An American sergeant named Miller supervised, but he mostly left them alone. He sat at a desk reading paperback novels and drinking coffee. Sometimes he brought them cookies from the mess hall. "You work hard," he said one day, watching Kate repair a torn jacket. "You don't have to work that hard, you know. You're prisoners. We're not going to punish you if you slow down." Kate did not know how to respond. In Germany, slowing down meant punishment. It meant less food, beatings, worse assignments. But here, Sergeant Miller seemed almost embarrassed to have them working at all. After work, there was free time. The women were allowed to walk around the compound within certain boundaries. There was a canteen where they could buy small items using vouchers they earned from work. Chocolate bars, cigarettes, writing paper, soap, toothpaste. Kate stood in the canteen one afternoon staring at the shelves. There were Hershey bars, packs of Lucky Strike cigarettes, bottles of Coca-Cola, magazines, playing cards, things she had not seen since before the war, things Germany had stopped producing years ago. "You can have 2 items per week," the clerk said. He was a young private who looked bored. "What do you want?" Kate pointed at a chocolate bar. The clerk handed it to her. She turned it over in her hands, reading the wrapper. Hershey's milk chocolate, made in Hershey, Pennsylvania. She thought about Pennsylvania, a place she had never seen, a place that made chocolate while Germany made war. That night, she sat on her bunk and broke off a piece of the chocolate. It melted on her tongue. Sweet and rich and utterly foreign. Anna sat beside her, eating her own chocolate bar in small, careful bites, making it last. Other women in the barracks were doing the same, savoring each square like it was gold. Some wrapped pieces in paper to save for later. Some ate the entire bar at once, unable to stop themselves. "Do you remember the chocolate we had before the war?" Elizabeth asked from her bunk across the aisle. "Real German chocolate from Berlin. My father would bring it home on special occasions." "I thought that was the best chocolate in the world," I remember Kate said. "But I have not had any chocolate, German or otherwise, since 1942. We were told all the sugar was needed for the war effort. And yet the Americans have enough sugar to make chocolate for their soldiers," Anna said quietly. "Enough to give it to their prisoners, too." The guilt was constant, a weight that pressed down on all of them. Letters arrived from Germany every few weeks, and they were all the same. Hunger, cold, destruction, families living in rubble, children with rickets and scurvy, cities without water or electricity. And here in an American prison camp, the women ate 3 meals a day and had chocolate. Anna's letter from her mother arrived in April. Kate sat with her while she read it, watching Anna's face grow paler with each line. When she finished, Anna folded the letter carefully and put it in her pocket. "My little brother died," Anna said flatly. "Pneumonia. They had no medicine, no coal to heat the apartment. He was 8 years old." Kate reached for Anna's hand, but Anna pulled away. She stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the camp yard where American soldiers were playing baseball in the afternoon sun. "He died while I was eating bacon and eggs for breakfast," Anna said. "While I was warm, while I was safe. He was freezing to death in Berlin, and I was here complaining that the coffee was not hot enough." "That is not your fault," Kate said. "Is it not?" Anna turned to face her, tears streaming down her face. "We worked for the regime that destroyed our country. We typed their letters, operated their equipment, supported their war machine, and when it all collapsed, we were captured by the enemy and treated better than our own people. How is that not our fault?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. Some women could not bear it. They stopped eating, pushing their trays away, saying they did not deserve it. The American medics force fed them until they started eating again. Even the refusal of food was not permitted. The Americans insisted on keeping them alive and healthy. Anna was one of them. She stopped eating 3 days after receiving the letter about her brother. She pushed her tray away at breakfast, at lunch, at dinner, her face growing paler, her body weaker. "I don't deserve it," she whispered when Kate tried to convince her. "My brother is dead and I am eating eggs." On the 4th day, Anna collapsed during her work shift in the laundry. She simply crumpled to the floor, her body too weak to stand. Medics carried her to the infirmary. Lieutenant Hartman made the decision. Force feeding. Kate was not allowed to be present, but she heard about it from Elizabeth, who worked in the infirmary. They held Anna down gently but firmly. Two medics on either side. A third inserted a tube through her nose, down her throat, into her stomach. Anna fought, screamed, begged them to let her die. "Why won't you let me die?" she shrieked. "I killed your pilots. I operated the lights that helped shoot them down. Let me die." But they did not let her die. They fed her, nutrients flowing through the tube, keeping her alive against her will. When it was over, Anna lay in the infirmary bed, her face turned to the wall, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Private O'Brien sat beside her bed. He had heard the screaming, had come to check on her. "You operated searchlights?" he asked quietly. Anna nodded, her face still turned away. "Good," O'Brien said. "That means you were doing your job. Protecting your city. I don't fault you for that." Anna's voice was barely a whisper. "But my brother is dead." "I know," O'Brien said, "and I'm sorry. But starving yourself won't bring him back. It just creates more death. And I've seen enough death." There was a quiet moment, the only sound the ticking of a clock on the wall, the distant murmur of voices from other parts of the camp. "I was at Buchenwald when we liberated it," O'Brien said. Anna turned to look at him, her eyes red and swollen. "Thousands dead." O'Brien continued, his voice soft but steady. "Thousands more dying, walking skeletons. I couldn't save them. They were too far gone. But I can save you. So I will. Even if you fight me." He pulled a photograph from his wallet, crumpled and stained. He handed it to Anna. It was black and white, the image grainy, but clear enough. Piles of bodies, living skeletons with hollow eyes, smokestacks in the background. "I took this myself," O'Brien said. "April 11th, 1945, Buchenwald. That's me in the corner. You can see my shadow." Anna stared at the photograph, her hands trembling. "The camp," she whispered. "They were real." O'Brien took the photograph back, carefully, like it was something precious and terrible. "Yes," he said, "they were real." Anna began to cry. Not quiet tears, but heaving sobs that shook her whole body. O'Brien did not try to comfort her, did not tell her it was all right. He just sat there silent, letting her cry for her brother, for her country, for the Lassus, for the truth. That night in the barracks, the women argued. It was the first time they had truly argued since arriving. Before, they had been too afraid, too united in their terror. But now cracks were forming. Ingrid insisted. "It is Allied propaganda. The photographs can be faked. They are exaggerating to justify what they did to our cities." Anna's voice was harsh, raw from crying. "The photographs are real. American soldiers who liberated the camps. They were there. They saw it. O'Brien saw it." Ingrid stood firm. "He's lying. It's psychological warfare." "Then we were betrayed," Elizabeth said quietly, her voice trembling. "We were lied to by our own leaders. Everything we believed, everything we fought for. It was all a lie." The admission hung in the air. Once spoken, it could not be taken back. And the next morning, Anna found the first message. It was hidden in her clean laundry. A small piece of paper folded and tucked between a shirt and a pair of trousers. German handwriting, neat and precise. "We see who eats American food. We see who wears American clothes. We see who forgets their oath. When the Reich rebuilds, collaborators will be held accountable." It was signed Fr. Franz Richter. Anna showed the note to Kate and Ingrid. They huddled in the corner of the barracks, speaking in whispers. "Richter," Kate said. "He's watching us." "How?" Anna asked. "He's in the male compound." "There are guards who sympathize," Ingrid said, her voice uncertain, "who pass messages." Over the next week, more messages arrived. Different women received them, all with the same theme. "You are being tested. You are being watched. Loyalty will be rewarded. Collaboration will be punished." The messages created fear, division. Some women began refusing extra food, refusing to wear the warmest clothes, trying to prove their loyalty to a regime that no longer existed. But others, like Kaden and Anna, began to see the messages for what they were. Threats from desperate men. Men who could not accept that the war was over, that the Reich had fallen. The American soldiers were a puzzle. They were young, most of them. Farm boys from Iowa and factory workers from Detroit and college students from California. They had fought across Europe, seen terrible things, lost friends, and yet they treated the German women with an awkward courtesy that was more confusing than hatred would have been. There was Corporal Martinez from Texas who worked in the motor pool. He had a photograph of his wife and baby daughter that he showed to anyone who would look. He taught some of the German women basic automotive maintenance, not because it was required, but because he said everyone should know how to change a tire. He spoke in slow, simple English and made jokes that the women did not always understand. But they laughed anyway. There was Sergeant Davis, a black soldier from Mississippi who supervised the laundry detail. Some of the German women had never met a black person before. The Reich's propaganda had taught them that black people were inferior, subhuman. But Sergeant Davis was patient and kind and treated them with more respect than many German officers had shown. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. One day Elizabeth asked him directly, "Why are you nice to us? We were told your people were treated badly in America, that you were oppressed." Sergeant Davis smiled, though it was a complicated smile. "That's true," he said. "America isn't perfect. We have our own problems with racism and injustice. But you know what the difference is? We can talk about it. We can fight to change it. We can make it better. Your country tried to make superiority into a science, into a law, and look where it got you." Elizabeth had no response to that. Private O'Brien worked as a guard in the compound. Kate saw him often, standing at his post or walking the perimeter. He nodded to the women when they passed. Sometimes he helped them carry heavy loads. Once when Kate dropped a basket of laundry, he picked it up for her and carried it to the barracks without being asked. "Why do you help us?" Kate asked him one day. Her English was improving. The camp offered English classes in the evenings, and many women attended. O'Brien looked surprised by the question. "Why wouldn't I? We are the enemy." O'Brien shook his head. "The war is over. You're not the enemy. You're just people who were on the wrong side." He paused. "And honestly, most of you were just secretaries and nurses. You didn't pull the triggers." But Kate knew that was not entirely true. She had typed letters for a Luftwaffe commander. She had organized flight schedules that sent bombers over England. She had been part of the machine, even if she had never held a weapon. The guilt of that sat heavy in her chest. "Did you fight in the war?" she asked. "Yeah," O'Brien said. His face went distant. D-Day, France, Germany. "I was at Buchenwald when we liberated it." The name hung between them. Buchenwald, the concentration camp. "I am sorry," Kate said quietly. O'Brien looked at her for a long moment. "Did you know about the camps?" "No," Kate said. Then more honestly, "I heard rumors, but I did not believe them. I thought they were lies." A lot of Germans say that, O'Brien said. He did not sound angry, just tired. "I don't know if I believe them, but I don't know if it matters anymore. The camps were real. The people in them were real. And they're dead now." He walked away, leaving Kate standing alone with the weight of his words crushing down on her shoulders. Then one evening in late April, something happened that changed everything. Sergeant Eugene Barnes had been watching the women since they arrived. He was 38 years old, hard-faced, cold-eyed. He had lost his brother at Normandy, watched him die on the beach, held him as the life drained out of him. Barnes had every reason to hate Germans, every reason to want revenge. But he had made a choice, the same choice O'Brien had made, the same choice Lieutenant Hartman had made, to follow the rules, to treat prisoners with dignity, even when it hurt, even when every fiber of his being screamed for vengeance. That evening, Barnes was supervising dinner service when a young private rushed up to him, face pale, out of breath. "Sergeant," the private said, "we have a problem at the main gate." Barnes's jaw tightened. Again. How many this time? 15, maybe 20. More coming. Sheriff is trying to disperse them, but they're not leaving. Barnes turned to Lieutenant Hartman, who was standing nearby. "Ma'am, townspeople at the gate. They want to see the Nazi women." Hartman's face tightened. "What are they carrying?" "Signs. Rope. One has a baseball bat." Barnes looked at the women eating their dinner, unaware of the danger gathering outside the fence. "Permission to triple the perimeter guard, ma'am," Barnes said, his voice hard. "I'll take first watch myself, all night if needed." "Granted," Hartman said. "And Sergeant, make sure O'Brien gets hot coffee and dry socks." That boy nearly froze himself for these prisoners. Already sent it, ma'am, Barnes said. Also sent extra blankets to their barracks. Temperature's dropping tonight. Then Barnes did something unexpected. He turned to the women, his voice harsh, loud, commanding. Listen up, he shouted. You stay inside this compound. You don't go near the fences. You don't talk to anyone outside. You don't even look at the civilians beyond the wire. You understand me? The women froze, terror flooding back. This was it. This was the real America, the America that Captain Steiner had warned them about. You break these rules, and there will be consequences. Barnes continued, severe consequences. You follow these rules, and you'll be safe. Clear. The women nodded, mute with fear. Kate watched Barnes storm out of the dining hall, watched him gather guards, watched him personally walk the perimeter, his rifle ready, his face set, and she realized something. Barnes was not threatening them. He was protecting them. The harsh tone, the severe warnings. They were not meant to terrorize. They were meant to keep the women away from the fence, away from the townspeople who wanted revenge, away from Americans who had lost sons and brothers and husbands and wanted someone to pay. Barnes was their shield. He stood watch all night. Kate saw him from the barrack window, walking the fence line, his breath fogging in the cold, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the wire, where shadows moved, where voices called out ugly things. And she understood that mercy was not simple. It was not easy. It was a choice that had to be made again and again, against hate, against grief, against the desire for revenge. Barnes had lost his brother, but he chose mercy anyway. Not because Germans deserved it, but because he refused to let the war turn him into something he was not. The next morning, Anna started eating again, not because she had forgiven herself, but because she finally understood. The enemy was not who she thought it was. The real enemy had been the lies. As Kate walked back to Barrack 14 that night, the melody from a movie they had watched still playing in her head, she realized the Americans had done something far more devastating than any torture could have been. They had shown her what she had lost. They had given her a glimpse of the world Germany had rejected in favor of conquest, impurity, and glory. And the worst part, the absolutely crushing part, she was starting to understand that she liked this world. This American world of hot showers and lavender soap and soldiers who chose mercy over vengeance. But liking it meant betraying everything she had believed. And hating it meant denying the truth her own body was telling her every time she ate real food, slept in a warm bed, wrapped herself in clean blankets. The war was over. But the real battle, the one inside her head, was just beginning. And she was not the only one fighting it. Because in the bunk above her, Ingrid Schneider was making plans. Plans that would force all of them to choose. Loyalty to a dead regime, or acceptance of an impossible truth. Weeks passed, then months. Winter gave way to spring, and the snow melted to reveal green grass and wildflowers. The women of Barrack 14 changed in ways that were impossible to ignore. They gained weight. Their hollow cheeks filled out. Their skin, which had been gray and sallow, began to glow with health. Their hair, which had been brittle and falling out from malnutrition, grew thick and shiny. Some of the younger women began to look like girls again instead of walking skeletons. Kate stood in front of the mirror in the washroom one morning and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back had color in her cheeks. Her eyes were bright. Her arms had regained some of their muscle. She looked healthy. She looked alive. And it filled her with shame. Look at us, Anna said bitterly that evening. We grow fat while Germany starves. The enemy feeds us better than our own leaders ever did. It was true, and everyone knew it. In the final years of the war, rations in Germany had been cut again and again. People had survived on bread made from sawdust and chestnuts, on watery soup with a few floating vegetables, on hope and propaganda. The women in Camp Stark ate better as prisoners than they had as free citizens of the Reich. The question haunted them all. Why? Why did the Americans treat them so well? Was it strategy, a way to show their superiority, or was it something else? Something that none of them wanted to name. Kate started keeping a diary. Paper and pencils were available in the canteen, and she filled notebook after notebook with her thoughts. Writing helped her make sense of the confusion. April 15th, 1945. I have been here 2 months. I am healthy. I am clean. I am well fed. I sleep in a warm bed. I work at a sewing machine in a heated room. I drink real coffee. I eat chocolate. How can this be captivity? How can this be punishment? The Americans allowed the women to listen to the radio in the evenings. The news that came through was devastating. Germany had surrendered completely. Hitler was dead. The cities were in ruins. Millions were displaced, starving, homeless. The full extent of the concentration camps was being revealed, and the horror was beyond comprehension. In the barracks at night, the women argued. It is Allied propaganda, Ingrid insisted. She had been a devoted party member. They are exaggerating to justify what they did to our cities. The photographs are real, Anna shot back. The American soldiers who liberated the camps. They were there. They saw it. O'Brien saw it. Then we were betrayed, Ingrid said, her voice cracking. We were lied to by our own leaders. Everything we believed, everything we fought for. It was all a lie. The admission hung in the air. Once spoken, it could not be taken back. Kate wrote in her diary that night, if we were lied to about the camps, what else were we lied to about? Were the Americans really monsters? No, they feed us. They clothe us. They treat us with more dignity than our own government ever did. Were the English subhuman? No. Were the Jews the enemy of Germany? I do not know what to believe anymore. The foundation has cracked, and I am falling through. The Americans showed films in the camp theater on Saturday nights. Hollywood movies, comedies, musicals, westerns. The women went reluctantly at first, expecting propaganda. But the films were not about the war. They were about romance, adventure, dancing. They showed an America that was vibrant and free and utterly foreign. The first film Kate saw was a musical called Meet Me in St. Louis. She sat in the darkened theater surrounded by other German women and a scattering of American soldiers and watched a story about an American family preparing for the 1904 World's Fair. There was singing, dancing, romance, comedy. The family worried about moving to New York. The daughters fell in love. The mother prepared elaborate dinners. It was so normal, so peaceful, so far from anything Kate had known for the past 6 years that it felt like watching life on another planet. When the lights came up, Kate found tears streaming down her face. She was not the only one. All around her, German women were crying silently, their faces wet with tears they could not explain. It was not sadness exactly, it was something deeper. A recognition of what they had lost, what Germany had thrown away in pursuit of conquest. Why are we crying? Elizabeth whispered. It was just a movie, just a silly musical. But Kate understood. They were crying because the film showed them what a normal life looked like. A life where the biggest worry was whether to move to another city, where families gathered for dinner and sang songs and fell in love, where children played in yards and mothers baked cakes and fathers came home from work. All the things Germany had sacrificed on the altar of total war. They have so much, Anna whispered beside her. And we have nothing. We destroyed ourselves while they built this. The contrast was unbearable. Germany had sacrificed everything for the war. Food, resources, lives, humanity itself, and for what? Defeat, destruction, mass graves. Meanwhile, America had sent its soldiers overseas but kept its homeland intact. Its cities still stood. Its people still danced. But while Kate and Anna were learning to see the truth, Ingrid Schneider was planning something that would test American mercy to its limits. May 1945, 3 months since arrival. Kate noticed Ingrid acting strange, whispering with other hardcore loyalists in the barracks, hoarding food, hiding extra socks in her footlocker. She had that look in her eyes. The same look Kate had seen in SS Captain Steiner's eyes in the ruins of Hamburg. The look of someone who refused to accept reality. What is she doing? Anna asked one evening, watching Ingrid stuff bread into her pockets at dinner. I do not know, Kate said, but it scares me. That night, Kate woke to the sound of creaking floorboards. She opened her eyes and saw Ingrid's bunk was empty, the blankets pulled back, the pillow still indented from her head. Kate sat up, heart pounding. If Ingrid was caught trying to escape, all the women might be punished. All the mercy they had been shown might evaporate. The Americans might finally show their true colors. Kate made a decision. She found the night guard at the barrack entrance, a young corporal who looked half asleep. Ingrid Schneider is missing, Kate said in halting English. I think she is trying to escape. The corporal's eyes went wide. He grabbed his radio. Within minutes, alarms were sounding across the camp. Searchlights swept the compound like white fingers searching for prey. Kate stood at the barrack window with Anna and Elizabeth, watching, waiting. They found Ingrid at the wire fence on the eastern perimeter. She had stolen wire cutters from the maintenance shed. She was halfway through the chain link when Sergeant Barnes and Private O'Brien arrived. Ingrid spun around. The wire cutters raised like a weapon. Her face was wild, desperate, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Stay back," she screamed in German. "I won't go back. I would rather die free than live as a pampered prisoner." Barnes did not draw his weapon. He held up his hands, palms out, showing he was unarmed. "Nobody's going to hurt you," he said, his voice calm. "Steady. Lies," Ingrid shrieked. "You'll punish me. You'll beat me. You'll put me in isolation." "No," Barnes said. "We won't, because we don't do that here." Ingrid's face crumpled. "Then what will you do? How will you make me pay?" O'Brien stepped forward slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "We'll bring you back," he said quietly. "Patch up your hands. You're bleeding from the wire. Give you hot chocolate. Put you to bed. And tomorrow you'll work in the infirmary like always." Ingrid stared at him. "That's not punishment." "No," O'Brien said. "It's not. Because punishing you doesn't serve anyone. You made a bad choice. You're scared. You're grieving for a country that doesn't exist anymore. But you're not evil. You're just lost." Something broke in Ingrid. She collapsed to her knees in the snow, the wire cutters falling from her hands, hitting the frozen ground with a metallic clang. Barnes picked up the cutters, pocketed them. Then he and O'Brien helped Ingrid to her feet, one on each side, supporting her weight. They walked her back to the compound. No handcuffs, no rough handling, just two soldiers helping a woman who had tried to escape. The medic cleaned and bandaged Ingrid's hands. The wire had cut deep into her palms. Then he made her hot chocolate, real chocolate melted in hot milk with marshmallows floating on top. He handed it to her, steam rising from the mug. "Drink," he said gently. "It'll help with the shock." Ingrid sat wrapped in a blanket, the hot chocolate warming her hands through the bandages. Kate sat beside her. "Why did you try to leave?" Kate asked. Ingrid was quiet for a long time, staring into the chocolate, watching the marshmallows slowly dissolve. "Because I don't know who I am anymore," she finally said, her voice hollow. "If everything I believed was a lie, then who am I? What's left?" Kate had no answer to that. The next morning, Lieutenant Hartman called Ingrid to her office. Kate waited outside, expecting to hear shouting. Punishment. The sound of handcuffs clicking. But when Ingrid emerged 30 minutes later, her face was wet with tears, but not from pain, from something else. "She offered me a chaplain," Ingrid said, her voice full of wonder. "After I tried to escape, she offered me a chaplain who speaks German, who can help me work through difficult transitions." She looked at Kate. What kind of captors respond to escape with hot chocolate and chaplains? Kate shook her head. "I do not know, but they are not what we were told." No punishment was issued. Ingrid returned to work that afternoon, and the other women watched in disbelief. Even Richter's messages seemed hollow now. What kind of psychological warfare responded to betrayal with mercy? If you've served in the military, or if your family members encountered former POWs after the war, we would love to hear your story in the comments. These moments of choosing mercy over vengeance are what truly made the greatest generation great. Now let me show you what happened when these women finally looked in the mirror and saw what American kindness had done to them. June 1945. 4 months since arrival, Kate stood alone in the washroom. Morning light streamed through the window, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. She was preparing for another day of work, another day of this strange life that was both captivity and restoration. She looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, for the first time in months. The woman staring back was unrecognizable from the skeleton who had stepped off the train in February. Her face was full, her skin clear and healthy, her eyes bright with life, her hair thick and shining. She had gained at least 20 pounds. Every rib that had been visible was now covered with healthy flesh. She looked like a person again. She looked alive. Beside the mirror on the shelf sat a bar of soap, lavender scented, American made. The same soap they had been given on that first day. The soap Kate had wanted to throw back. The soap she had believed was the beginning of degradation. Kate picked up the soap, held it in her hands, felt its smooth weight, breathed in the scent that had become so familiar. This simple object had become a symbol of everything that had changed. On that first day, she had believed accepting this soap would be the beginning of her destruction. Instead, it had been the beginning of her restoration. The Reich had promised them glory and delivered starvation. The Reich had promised them victory and delivered ruins. The Reich had promised them that the enemy would destroy them, but the enemy had given them soap, food, blankets, beds, dignity. Kate looked at herself in the mirror, holding the soap, and felt the last wall inside her collapse. She had been fighting this truth for months, trying to maintain her loyalty to a homeland that had betrayed her, but she could not fight it anymore. The enemy had made her human again. Her own nation had made her starve. She began to cry, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. She cried for the lies she had believed. She cried for the years wasted serving a regime that had destroyed her country. She cried for the millions who had died in a war that should never have been fought. She cried for the girl she had been who believed in the Reich's promises, and for the woman she had become who knew better. Anna found her there, still holding the soap, tears streaming down her face. "Kate, what is wrong?" Kate looked at her friend through blurred vision. "Everything we were told was a lie, Anna. Everything, and the proof is here." She held up the soap. This simple bar of soap. They gave it to us on the first day and we threw it back at them because we believed they were monsters. But they were not monsters. We were the ones who served monsters. Anna's face crumpled. She sat down on the bench, put her head in her hands. "I know," she whispered. "I have known for weeks. But saying it out loud makes it real." "It is real," Kate said, "and we have to live with that." The announcement came in August 1945. Germany had been divided among the Allied powers. Prisoners would be repatriated in stages, sent back to whatever zone their hometowns fell under. For most of the women in Camp Stark, that meant the American or British zones. The news should have brought joy. They were going home. But instead, the barracks filled with dread. "I am afraid," Anna admitted one night, lying in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. "I am afraid to leave." Other women nodded in the darkness. It was a shameful thing to admit, but true. Here they were safe, fed, warm, cared for. In Germany, they would return to ruins, starvation, judgment, and the impossible task of rebuilding a shattered nation. Kate wrote in her diary, "I fear going back more than I feared coming here." What kind of person does that make me? A traitor, a coward, or simply someone who has learned that the world is more complicated than the lies we were told? The day of departure arrived in September. The women packed their few belongings into bags provided by the Americans. They were given traveling clothes, food for the journey, and a small amount of money. Some were crying, others were silent. Private O'Brien was at the gates as they prepared to board the buses. Kate found him and stood before him, not knowing what to say. "Thank you," she finally managed, "for the blanket, for the soap, for everything." O'Brien smiled, that same sad smile from the day in the snow. "You take care of yourself, Kate," he said. "And when you get home, tell people the truth about what happened here. Tell them we're not all monsters." "I will," Kate promised, "even if they do not believe me." The buses rolled through the gates of Camp Stark for the last time. Kate looked back through the rear window, watched the barracks, the guard towers, the fence recede into the distance. She had arrived at this place expecting death, and had found life. She had come as an enemy, and left as something else. Not quite American, no longer quite German, something in between. Hamburg in September 1945 was a nightmare. Entire neighborhoods had been reduced to rubble. People lived in cellars and bombed-out buildings. Children with hollow eyes begged in the streets. The smell of death and decay hung over everything. The first thing that struck Kate when she stepped off the train was the silence. Not true silence. There were sounds of reconstruction, hammers and sosos, voices calling to each other, but the silence of absence. No traffic, no music from cafes, no church bells. The sounds of a living city were gone, replaced by the hollow echo of survival. She walked through streets she barely recognized. The bakery where her mother had bought bread every morning was a pile of bricks. The school she had attended as a child was a burned shell with trees growing through the roof. The park where she had played as a girl was now a cemetery, hundreds of wooden crosses marking hurried graves. People stared at her as she passed. She was too healthy, too clean, too well-fed. Her American-made clothes marked her as someone who had been elsewhere, who had not shared in the suffering. Some looked at her with envy, others with resentment. One old woman spat at her feet. Kate found her mother living in the basement of what had once been their apartment building. The building itself was a burned shell, but the basement was intact. Her mother had aged 20 years in the 18 months since Kate had last seen her. She was skeletal, her face all sharp angles and loose skin. Kate, her mother whispered, and collapsed into her arms sobbing. That night they ate thin soup made from turnips. It was all her mother had. Kate tried to explain where she had been, what had happened. Her mother listened in silence, her face unreadable. You were in an American prison camp, her mother said slowly, and they fed you, gave you clean clothes, let you keep diaries. Yes, her mother's voice broke. And you look healthy. You have gained weight. Your skin is clear. You look like you have been to a spa, not a prison. The words were not an accusation, but they felt like one. Kate had been in captivity, eating 3 meals a day, while her mother had been free, starving in a ruined city. I am sorry, Kate said. I know it is not fair. Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she reached across the table, took Kate's hand. No, she said, I am glad. I am glad you were somewhere safe. I am glad the Americans treated you well. It means there is still some humanity left in this world. Kate felt tears sting her eyes, because her mother, who had lost everything, could still find grace, could still be grateful that her daughter had survived, even if the survival felt like betrayal. Years passed. Kate rebuilt her life in Munich. She worked as a seamstress again, made enough to live, never married. The war had taken too much, left too many ghosts, but she kept the diary, and she kept something else, a bar of soap, dried and cracked, barely recognizable, but the scent still faint. Lavender, the original bar from February 1945, the bar she had almost thrown back, the bar that had changed everything. In 1968, Kate sat in her small apartment in Munich. She was 46 now, her hair streaked with gray, her hands worn from decades of sewing. Her daughter Anna, named after her friend who had survived the war but died of pneumonia in 1952, was visiting from university. Anna was studying history. She wanted to know about the war, about her mother's experience. So the Americans were kind to you, Anna asked. Yes, Kate said, though it took me a long time to understand why. Why did they do it? Kate thought about Private O'Brien sitting in the snow, his lips turning purple, refusing to put on his coat until the women accepted the blankets. She thought about the soap, the food, the beds, the dignity, because they understood something we did not, Kate said. They understood that cruelty breeds more cruelty, but kindness can break a cycle. They could have punished us. They could have made us suffer, and it would have been justified, but instead they chose mercy, and that mercy changed us in ways that punishment never could have. Do you still have the diary, Anna asked? Kate nodded, pulled out a worn notebook from a drawer, opened to a page from June 1945, showed it to her daughter. Anna read her mother's handwriting. The Americans defeated us with soap. It sounds absurd, but it is true. They could have destroyed us with hatred, but they chose kindness instead. And kindness, I have learned, that is harder to carry than cruelty. Cruelty confirms your beliefs. Kindness forces you to change them. Kate reached into the drawer, pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth, unwrapped it carefully. The soap was dried, cracked, barely holding together. The white had turned yellow with age, but the scent was still there, faint but unmistakable. Lavender. Anna stared at it. This is the soap. Yes, Kate said. The soap they gave us on the first day. The soap we threw back because we believed kindness was weakness, because we believed mercy was a lie, because we had been taught that the only truth was strength and conquest and purity. She held the soap in her palm, but this soap taught me a different truth. That strength is choosing mercy when you could choose vengeance. That power is treating the defeated with dignity. That real victory is not in how you fight, but in what you build after. Anna touched the soap gently, reverently. This is what I want you to remember, Anna Kate said. Not the camps, not the ruins, not the death. Remember this, that humanity survived, that even in war's darkest moment, some people chose kindness. And that choice, that simple act of handing soap to an enemy, that changed the world, one bar at a time. Which traditional American values do you think are most important to preserve today? Mercy, dignity, or the belief that even enemies deserve humanity? Tell us your thoughts in the comments, because what happened with that bar of soap proves that these values don't just win wars, they win hearts. And sometimes that's even more powerful. Kate placed the soap back in the drawer. Anna watching. The scent of lavender lingering in the air, a symbol of transformation. Mercy, humanity, proof that kindness can be more powerful than cruelty. That sometimes the most devastating weapon is not a bullet, but a bar of soap, offered to someone who expects to die. That bar of lavender soap sits in a museum in Munich today, a reminder that the greatest victories are not always won on battlefields. It sits in a small glass case. The label reads, Symbol of American Mercy, Camp Stark, New Hampshire, February 1945. Beside it is Kate's diary, open to that page from June. The words visible through the glass. The Americans defeated us with soap. Every year, survivors and their children visit the exhibit. They stand before the case, they read the words, they remember. Some cry, some smile, some simply stand in silence, thinking about what that simple bar of soap represents. The choice to show mercy when vengeance would have been easier. The choice to see humanity in the enemy. The choice to build instead of destroy. One visitor, an elderly American veteran, stood before the case for a long time, his grandson beside him. Did you know about this, Grandpa? The boy asked. The old man nodded. I was there. Camp Stark. I was one of the guards. He pointed to the soap. We didn't think it was a big deal at the time. It was just soap, just doing what was right. But I guess sometimes the smallest acts of kindness are the ones that echo the loudest. The boy looked up at his grandfather. Did it work? Did the kindness change them? The old man smiled. Look around you, son. We're standing in a free Germany, a peaceful Germany, a Germany that learned the lesson. Yeah, it worked. They stood together, grandfather and grandson, American and the descendants of those who had been shown mercy, united by a bar of soap that smelled like lavender. If this story moved you, if it challenged what you thought you knew about World War II, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this one, stories that reveal the complexity of war, the power of mercy, and the resilience of the human spirit. And remember, sometimes the most powerful victories are won not with weapons, but with soap. Thank you for watching. The camera lingers on the museum case, the soap, the diary, the words, then slowly fades to black, and the scent of lavender, faint but eternal, remains.